I can't imagine how that would be, being a bad steward or an irresponsible steward of the resources on the earth. I don't know exactly where, but there have been pits. You know, we have the La Brea tar pit. Well, that's literal asphalt, heavy crude that's at the surface. If somebody in our distant past came across one of those and actually accidentally saw lightning strike it or something and it lit up, or however it may have come about, that it proved to be a source of fuel of some kind. Man's been making tools for a long time.
Faith and Failures Podcast.
So I literally just answered the next question. Didn't mean to. Do you think understanding the biblical narrative of creation is important to Christians today? Yes.
Clearly it is, yes.
Yes, it is the foundation. So ethical and social questions. So how does the idea of being created in the image of God, how does that influence Christian ethics by being created in the image of God?
Not just in the image, but for the purpose that we were created and are created. He created man and woman. He created man and drew woman from his side, and he created them for a purpose. He said, fill the earth.
Yeah.
Populate the earth. Two men couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Two women couldn't do that. The same with the animal kingdom. It was male and female. If it hadn't been male and female, the animal kingdom would have died. Everything would have died. It couldn't have perpetuated itself. It couldn't have been special. It couldn't have been anything. It would have been some random mistake by somebody that was just playing with things. And that's not who God is. That's not what God is. That's not what He's about. They like to throw around the term in this day and time because it seems to sound better to people that don't necessarily accept the Bible as a foundation for truth, but they call it special design, and I'm missing the term. But anyway, it's as though we recognize that there is a design, that there was it's intelligent design behind what we have today. We just don't know what its source is. Everything was created, engineered perfectly, and all that sort of stuff. Well, that suggests that there was an experimentation process of some kind, where you say, well, we're going to try this and see how it works, and if it doesn't work, then we're going to change this or change this or change that. God, when God spoke everything into existence, it was direct from His heart. It was creation. It wasn't design. It wasn't
trial and error.
It wasn't experimentation, right? Trial and error. It wasn't anything like that. He knew what He intended, and that's what He went after. And if we look at it, we seem to understand, I will say, we seem to understand that in eternity past, prior to the beginning of time, it was only the triune God that existed. What expanse of time that might identify with, we can't possibly know, and it doesn't matter.
And until we see Him face to face, we'll probably never even be able to wrap our heads around it.
And then it won't matter.
And then from our death to then on, once we finally can have the answers, it won't really matter anymore.
That's exactly right.
And I was thinking about this a minute ago. I've had people tell me, and they're being funny, but I've had the same thoughts. Like, what's my attitude or side eye at Adam going to be when I get to heaven? Like, this is your fault, man. But I thought about this a minute ago when we were talking about Jesus coming down and then going back up. Adam had to face Jesus. He had to come down and give his life because Adam messed up, because Eve messed up. And I was like, man, I ain't going to give him no issues because he's literally had to be with Jesus all this time. I was like, he's probably got his fill of feeling wrong and grieved because he was an idiot.
Well, if he received Christ, when Christ went into the earth, that's the way it's described. Christ went into the earth to meet everybody that was pre-Messiah.
Yeah.
And they, in whatever you want to call it, Gehenna or whatever state you want to say that they were in, he met those souls and gave them the opportunity then.
That would be another club episode too.
Well, and I wouldn't even know where to study that because that is such a brief glimpse.
There's not depth to it.
And obviously with a huge imagination, you can imagine, but I can't go there.
Some people take that little stuff in the Bible right there and they make a whole season of episodes. And I'm like,
Well, some people take that little dab of anything out of the word and make a cult out of it,
or a denomination.
or a denomination, or a non-denomination. Yeah.
Yeah, or nothing against non-denominational people, but we value. This is why he's saying this, and I'm kind of speaking for him. He's here, but we've talked about this before. We value checks and balances.
Yes, we do.
Even inside of denominations, there can be people that can go unchecked, and it causes division and damage to the body of Christ. And we value the body of Christ so much that sometimes when people break away from a denomination, now if it's a wrong theology or whatever, they're not being biblically sound, right, and they don't know where to go and they branch off, that's fine. But people don't want to fall in or be held accountable for their actions. They end up becoming non-denominational because now there's no one to answer to. That is dangerous. That's why a lot of pastors today have fallen. A lot of congregations have been split, damaged, and destroyed and damaged the name of God.
Yes.
Which is, I don't want to be in those shoes. But they don't have someone keeping them accountable. They become the guy or the woman, and there's nobody who can step up to them, nobody who can question them, and that becomes dangerous because God designed us. I mean, Adam was there by himself for a while, but eventually Eve came about because we need people around us. It's important for us to have those relationships. God values relationships. So let's see. What implications does the biblical view of creation have on topics like environmental stewardship? Am I being biblical if I drive a Tesla? I had to say it. I'm sorry. I thought about that one yesterday.
Well, God gave Adam and Eve dominion, or they gave mankind dominion over the earth. God already knew as populations grew, as people expanded across the face of the earth, there would become enterprise. There would become things like there would be farmers, and then there would be people who would buy farmers' goods or trade for farmers' goods because they raised cattle or because they made tools or implements or whatever it was it did, and however you want to describe it. And God gave us minds to see what is available and to use those things for the betterment as much as we possibly can or should.
Yeah.
We could get into arguments concerning nuclear fission and things like that. Did we really need it, or was it just the end of war? It really doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
It's done now. But in terms of like drilling for oil and gas,
fracking and all that stuff,
hydraulic fracturing, that's been around. That suddenly became a new term, and that the first well was hydraulically fractured in like 1948. And I made a very good living in the hydraulic fracturing of oil and gas wells.
Yeah.
My entire career in the oil and gas industry. It's a process that enables one wellbore to draw resources from further away from that wellbore than it could if it was just drilled and allowed to produce just from whatever it could get without being fractured.
I wasn't sure exactly what that was.
It's just if you think about having two 2x4s nailed together and you could focus pressure between those two boards, you're going to start to part those boards. Well, subterranean structures, formations, sedimentary layers, you drill into them and you apply enough hydraulic pressure across that zone. You actually shoot holes in the pipe and you pressure up on that pipe against that formation, and you reach a pressure at which that rock starts to part, just as though it was two 2x4s or something like that. And you continue to pump at that pressure, at that parting pressure, and you continue to extend that crack further out away from the wellbore. And nobody needs a lesson in hydraulic fracturing, but in order to keep that open and flowing, then we would put sand, or some formations had such closure pressures on them that they required much stronger materials than just sand. So we would pump ceramics or some kind of material strong enough to hold the walls of that formation open and productive.
So question, is that, I know you're in that industry, you're not now, so all you tree huggers, calm down. But is that is that being a bad steward of what God gave us? If he gave us the resources that are in the earth to do what we're doing today.
I can't imagine how that would be being a bad steward or an irresponsible steward of the resources on the earth. I don't know exactly where, but there have been pits. You know, we have the La Brea tar pit. Well, that's literal asphalt, heavy crude that's at the surface. If somebody in our distant past came across one of those and actually accidentally saw lightning strike it or something and it lit up, or however it may have come about, that it proved to be a source of fuel of some kind. Man's been making tools for a long time.
Yeah.
A long time. I'm sure that Adam was probably involved in the making of tools to improve his ability to break the ground that was cursed for him because of his sin. But and it takes heat. If it's not made out of wood, if it's made out of iron or some other form of metal, then it takes heat in order to melt that.
Yeah.
And you're going to run out of forests pretty soon if the only source of heat you have is trees to burn.
Yeah.
So you find a more efficient means to provide that means. That's being a good steward, is trying to be responsible enough to do what you need to do and do it the best and most non-invasive way you can.
So what your summation is, or what you're taking on this field or this category of resources in the earth, is that God obviously placed it here.
Yes.
If we don't use it, why is it here?
That's right.
It's almost like God knew eventually we would get there, or he led us in that direction. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, really, we could use up all the resources very, very soon, and it would be probably perfect timing because the Lord's about to come back.
Coal is one of the most abundant resources for fuel across the entire earth.
Now, how is that how electricity is made? How's electricity made? Like a common, I turn on a light. Do you know where that comes from and how is that made? Like here locally?
Well, you're burning a fuel of some kind.
Yeah.
Except now some people are turning windmills or
right.
or solar panels. But
yeah.
Anyway, you heat water generally, and that steam water flows through turbines to improve the ability to drive the turbines. Hot, heated water seems to do better than anything. Even if you build a generator at a dam, a hydroelectric dam, they do generate electricity and can generate electricity, but you can only hold water back for so long. Some of them only produce electricity for X amount of hours per day in order to keep the river flowing that they've dammed up to some extent, but to make sure that the reservoir doesn't run dry trying to produce electricity. So it's one of the more effective, and it can be done with coal. Coal was very common early on, and then natural gas came into play and was very effective at.
Because the reason I was asking, because a lot of people, from what I have heard, read, and seen, people think that they are doing their part by getting electric things, and you have to plug it into your house.
You're increasing the demand. You're increasing the demand for on the infrastructure that supplies electricity. You're increasing the demand, and kind of counterproductive. And Texas has experienced that very recently. During the real harsh winter, where the wind turbines
froze up
and couldn't do anything. Well, what they've done is they've decommissioned or shut down and gotten to the place where the ERCOT in Texas literally shuts down very effective natural gas and coal-fired generators and allows the renewable energy to take its place. Well, solar panels can't do anything when they're covered with snow or the sun's not shining, and wind turbines evidently have more of a limitation than what anybody ever thought of too. So from a practical perspective, we're spending a lot of money to perpetuate a renewable source of electricity, wind and solar, and nobody's thought about the amount of land that it takes. How many hundreds of thousands of acres of solar panels would it require in order to run a city or a state? And if you go to a state, how many hundreds of thousands of acres are going to have to be occupied with nothing but solar panels, and who are you going to take it away from in order to have it? And then having done so, then whenever conditions aren't right for that particular source of energy to produce power,
Then you're stuck.
then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So electric cars, there are studies that have said that electric cars are probably less environmentally friendly than the hydrocarbon fuel burning, the internal combustion engines. On their increase in weight increases the weight on their tires.
Sandra said, "Hey, Sandra."
Raises more dust.
Yeah.
As you go down the road, man, you never think about it, but tires produce some kind of dust that settles on everything and all that sort of stuff. The things,
Especially if you're
it's
burning
made
rubber.
of most of them are made out of plastic. A whole lot of plastic goes into the making of a car. Those are derivatives from hydrocarbons. Natural gas they produce polymers from natural gas that make the plastics that are going into the production of everything that you can see. But if you do away with it, then where are you going to get what's going to be the source of your plastic? You can't recycle ad infinitum.
Yeah.
And probably recycling is probably one of the least efficient ways of doing anything.
Tell that to.
Well, I've already made a million enemies. If there would be that many people that would look, but because some people are just sold on the fact that we must recycle.
Yeah, but I don't know. The people go nuts with that stuff as far as like, because where we are right now as a culture, as a world, it's impossible to go backwards. Or maybe this would be an idea like before we started on this wave of how we do things now, but now we're riding the wave. I don't know what it's not gonna fix it at all.
Faith and Failures Podcast.